Bonjour tout le monde, Tavy Baisley here from French Speak and the lovely Sarah Lobegeiger de Rodriguez from Voice Science today. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Thank you so much for coming on. I thought that our students at French Speak would be so excited to hear some of the things you've got to share that I learned from you at the conference a few weeks ago when we met in Melbourne, where we got to meet lots of different people who have a big love for languages, and you came on and spoke and my jaw hit the floor and I thought I have to get Sarah to come and talk to the French Speak learners. So thanks so much for taking time today to do that with us. Can you tell us a bit more about your own French learning experience?
Yeah, of course. I'd be really happy to do so. So my French learning has come from a different direction, probably from the members in your study community. It was forced upon me. So when I was 20, I decided I would switch from acting to opera singing. I'd been taking singing lessons for a long time, and I decided that instead of being a Shakespearean actress, which was my goal, I was going to become an opera singer, which is a very long process. My first audition aria to enter the conservatorium was actually a French song. I can't remember the name of it. So I had to get my French sorted as best as I could, given that I was born in Perth, 21 years old. I worked in a French patisserie for a few years, I have to say, but definitely that didn't help my sung French. So for me, French has always been a thing that I've had to learn around the pronunciation of the sounds rather than fluency for speaking, because in opera we are dealing with very old texts and really non-functional sort of things for everyday conversation. And there's so many languages, we don't have time to sort of master each of them. So I chose German as the language that I would learn to speak in as a singer, and French has always just been doing my best with whatever information I can gather. So once I got into my musical performance degree at VCA, I had French in the final year of our studies. So I think that indicates the impression in Australia that French in the opera singing community is always the hardest one, although I'd argue Russian's much trickier grammatically. So we had to learn French for the year. We were given, the need to buy the Collins Dictionary of French. We had to translate lots of song texts, so texts by many of the French poets. And then in my final recital, I had to do some French art song, which I was taught to read aloud a lot and practice my reading pronunciation for it. But I've since discovered to learn pronunciation, and this is a tip for all of you, you need to link it to something that you're actually going to do with the language. So for me, sitting and reading French, I'm actually quite weak at it because some French is very different and what's going on with the brain is so different. So if you're practicing your pronunciation, really work on the phrases you will actually say in relation to it rather than just words on their own, because you'll never just say words on their own. Very rarely do we do that. So trying to find a really relevant context. And then I went to a class, an intensive at Alliance Française. That's the only official French training I've had other than training from my opera teachers who have been usually pretty good with sung French, because we actually pronounce lots of the sounds you wouldn't say that you would do when you're speaking. So according to the rules of music, we have to say a lot of the T's on the end as we link it across onto the next vowel. So c'est un, we'd actually say, where you'd never say that in spoken French, I don't think. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting, because there's a whole world of rules around those liaisons.
Yes.
And with it is a, c'est un, we would. But there are some that are compulsory liaisons, some are optional, some are forbidden ones. There's lots of rules around that. But for the musicality, of course, you've got to make it sound nice. And it's all about the flow, even more than when we speak. So I can imagine some amendment of those rules.
There's massive bodies of textbooks around how to sing French for opera. So we always have to check the rules there. It's very different from spoken. And a lot of French natives, if I sing an aria, they'll often say they don't really understand what I've said because they're not used to sung operatic French. It's quite different from what I gather.
Yes, absolutely. So most of my students are English speakers. I taught in Ireland and in the UK and in Australia for 13 years now. What do you see as being an extra challenge for English speakers, especially Australians, when they have to speak French?
I think for all Australians or even just English native speakers, there's two challenges. The first is often the lack of exposure to alternate languages from a young age. Mm-hmm. So as a speech pathologist, we learn a lot about how the brain acquires new pronunciation sounds and the difference between how kids get them and adults get them. So the research is solid. Your biggest challenge as an adult is that you cannot mimic. So when someone shows you a sound and they say the sound for you, the ability to replicate what you hear will be really weak. And that's because the brain has already kind of solidified in its capacity to mimic. So young children are like parrots. You know, if a parrot, it hears a sound over and over again, and the way the brain is wired, it can instantly replicate that sound really accurately. Kids can do that because they're in this phase of learning language in overdrive. So the brain is very plastic for mimicry. Once we're about the age of 13, producing sounds without substituting to our mother tongue is pretty much impossible, unless if someone shows you the anatomical position of the sound, like where your tongue is, what your lips are doing, what your voice is doing, and the shaping of the mouth mechanically for the sound. But to sit there and just go say ooh, ooh, and you know, everyone be ooh, repeating back the sounds that you have in your mother tongue. So you're really calibrated to mother tongue. So it's fighting that battle and trying to see that pronunciation training, ironically, as an adult, is not about the sound you hear. It's about the mechanics to make the sound you hear. Whereas the instruction for kids is look at me, copy me. And kids just get it. Yes. Adults, you need to go, you need to ask questions like, what does my mouth have to do for this? Or where is my tongue? Or what's my voice doing? So that's the main challenge. Yes. The other factor for French is very much around there's consonants that English native speakers have nothing like, as I'm sure you've picked up by now. And then we have a lot more vowels in Australian English. So taking all these extra vowels that you have and deleting them so that they never happen in your spoken French is probably really challenging. So it's very hard to not do sounds. And the duration, the Australian vowels are very long and usually very horizontal. So French doesn't really ask you to open your mouth to the side. So watching out that your vowels sit more centrally with the shape of your mouth and making sure that you don't go say with this really open, that will change the tone of the voice as well. By how open your mouth is. So just sort of knowing the space that you can play with to sound more like a French native, if that's your goal.
Yes, I love that. And I think it is for most people. They know they're not going to totally delete their accent, but they want to be better understood, and they understand that if they can say things more closely, they will be able to pick it up. Because if they just do an interpretation of how the word is actually pronounced, that's the word they'll be looking for when they're listening to someone speak or question, and they'll never recognize that word because that's not actually how it's pronounced. So just trying to work on not making anyone too paranoid or too perfectionist in their pursuit, because I don't know if I should say it's impossible to totally lose the accent, but there's a big scope of everyone understands what you're saying, whatever word you say in French, and you can be understood and you can understand everything in return. So that's the goal, really. We don't want to go any further. My mom's Irish and she's been living in France, immersed around work, French people, life, shops, schooling, other parents, had 4 kids, many businesses. Her Irish accent is still there when she speaks. She will go to a new place and people will go, oh, I love your accent. Where are you from? She's like, in her 60s, I've been living here since I'm 17 years old. When are people going to stop asking me, where's my accent from? I'm like, no.
It's tricky. I think it depends on, what everyone in language learning has different preferences as well. So there's nothing wrong with aiming for the best you can get with your pronunciation. It's just like some learners might think, oh, I don't mind if my grammar isn't super tight. I just want to have a conversation on the bus when I'm traveling. And others might be like, I'm an English teacher and grammar is very important and I want to nail French grammar. The same for pronunciation. I think that's an area that often gets neglected. In opera, we have to get it right. We can't ever sound super native, but the expectation is that we sound native. So if you're someone who likes sounds and music and loves the sound of the language, for you, you may want to actually devote as much time to the pronunciation as you would to the grammar. So it's about sort of showing respect to the language, but also matching it to what your interests as a learner are. And I think a lot of instances with the languages, when we're learning them in academies and things like that, there's this notion that getting your idea out is the be all and the end all, but the cherry on the top is saying it, getting the tone, getting the expression, being able to show what your thoughts are through the French sound is actually a really wonderful thing to aim for. And don't just stop at the grammar if you're someone who loves to be precise. Yes. You can just open up a whole new love of the language by checking the sounds once you've got your basics for grammar in place, or even at the same time as getting your basics, because it's very hard to undo bad habits. So, you know, doing grammar alongside your pronunciation at the same time when you're conjugating and making sure that you're using the correct vowel and those frequent verbs means that later down the track, when you've got the time to do pronunciation, you don't need to do it because you've done it from the outset in a multitasking kind of approach. So I think that often it's left to the last thing as the last thing. Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
All in one, it's all one. Yeah.
I think some people do it. Some people do it at the start and get the basics,
yes,
and they forget about it, and yes, then they go and add lots of vocabulary and lots of grammar rules.
Also important.
When they put it together, because they didn't maintain the pronunciation, and they've now introduced new sounds that maybe they weren't introduced.
Yes.
The first lesson they did a little bit of pronunciation. Then they find it hard to be understood, and they get those awful and heartbreaking experiences that they tell me about. I went to France and I tried and I knew what I was saying and I know grammatically it was right, but they just kept reverting back into English because they've been studying for a decade or 2 decades more than me, so their English was up here and I was babbling in French. And it was just too hard for the French speaker to just keep in their mind, I guess, switching the letters. So they go, oh, you're saying oo, but I think you mean u. So I'm going to, every time you say oo in that sentence, I've got to go back and put everything as an u. Every time you said an R, you would say more of a W sound. So I'm just going to go back and replace them. Oh, I think I know what you said. That's a lot of work for someone who's not.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
That's you. So you're making it, I think it's a sign of politeness too, to try and make yourself understood as well as possible, and not the old-fashioned way of just say it louder.
Yes, or slower. Yeah, or slower. Yeah, absolutely, Debbie. Yeah.
So my next question is a bit more technical. So being a voice and phonetics expert.
Not really, but doing my best.
Do you?
It's very kind of you.
Yes, you blew me away with all the phonetics and the depth of knowledge that there is really with the International Phonetics Alphabet and how it applies to English language versus others. And I just had so many ahas in your presentation. So could we take a look at a few tricky French sounds together?
Yes, sure.
The first one is the letter R. The sound.
Yes, very tricky, and one that we don't sing. So I've never needed it for sung French. However, if I were to introduce a song, I'd have to try and get it, because when I switch to speaking, if I'm announcing that I'm going to sing something, I have to do my best. So Debbie, would you like me to share my screen? Because I can show sort of something on my screen that might also help. Does that sound good?
Absolutely.
Okay, so here you see the phonetic alphabet for every single language in the world. It looks terrifying. It looks like chemistry, but it's much simpler, or I wouldn't be doing it. And this is talking about the position of the mouth. So what I'm going to do is we'll cross-reference. This is the symbol that you're aiming for, and we'll talk about it. So the sound, what's good to know is that the sound is like other sounds you already have in English, and I'll show you a few of those. It's just the position is different. So this sound is a fricative. So a fricative is a sound that is the product of distortion of air or voice that holds for a duration. So I'll give you a very simple example. We've got this sound here. So the sound is long. That's the first thing you need to do.
Okay.
I create that sound by sealing my lip with my teeth. And whatever gets through the gaps over a duration of time makes the V sound. So now if we go, so that's at the front of the mouth, and we call it labiodental, labio, lip, dental, teeth, lips and teeth. So now we know V is a fricative, it sustains, it's distorted airstream with my lips sealing at my teeth. So now we need to know where's the point of contact for the French R. Okay, I hope that wasn't too sloppy. So if we look here, we see uvula. Now, do you all know where your uvula is?
No idea.
Okay, so let's have a little Google of that. Sorry, I didn't have a picture prepared. So it's a uvular consonant. And if we just look at the uvula, most people have one, although at times it gets cut with adenoid surgery or like sinus surgery or anything around snoring, it may get snipped. So it's this little flap of tissue that's at the back of your mouth. So what you need is you've got airstream coming from your lungs through your voice, and that airflow has to cause this to trill or vibrate.
Yes.
So to do that, you have to make sure that your tongue is flat and out of the way, because in English we've got and our tongue blocks the mouth because it lifts at the roof of the mouth. Yeah, so here's the roof of my mouth, here's my tongue, and I go like that with really round lips usually. For the uvular R, you don't want your tongue to block the cavity. Yeah, if we look at it from the side view, we need to get airstream onto this. And if my tongue blocks here, I just won't be able to get it trilling as well. So you keep your tongue flat and low, and then you need to sustain airstream. Now this sound, which Debbie, I didn't even realize until this morning, this sound technically should have vibration through the voice, right? Okay. Because it's categorized as having vibration. So what you have to do is get this here vibrating. So if you put your fingers gently on your throat, keep your tongue flat. It's really hard for me. I'm a bit messy there.
I like it. I like it. It makes a lot of sense. The tongue thing, I literally have students put a pen in their mouth to keep it down.
Okay.
They don't notice sometimes that they lift it. So
right.
I was half getting them there, but you've explained it so much better. The vibration makes sense, because that's a really good check, because sometimes they run out of air when they say it.
Yes.
They're not prepared to kind of exhale at the same time, and the sound, they just choke.
Naturally, it's really hard.
Run up to it a bit more. So a bit more air, tongue down, and then that.
You can also think about, so what you need to do to get a sound out to get a sound right, you have to position the sound before you make it. And if you don't get the position before that sound arrives, it's too late for most sounds to correct it. So what you might find when you're pronouncing this sound is the tongue is coming up, and if your tongue is not in the right position, you will never get it. It's going to be a total nightmare. So if you have a really tactile cue, the pen is a good idea, but you can't do that when you're at the boulangerie. So you have to put the tip of your tongue. The pen is great for home drills, and I would never knock it. Fantastic, because you just can't lift the tongue. I've had to put my fingers in my mouth for singing and all sorts of things, but I can't do it on stage. So it's great for practice. But if you just aim to put the end of your tongue and make it contact the back of your bottom teeth, so the surface of your bottom teeth, and hold it there, and just check that your tongue is sealed before you buzz here. So you so step one, seal the tongue, buzz the throat, and then you're good to go. If you don't do that process, it's just, it won't even be trial and error. It's probably just going to be error, because sounds are the product of a phonetic position. So it's just like, if I want to drive the car, I have to lift the handbrake. If I want to pronounce R, I have to flatten my tongue and vibrate here. It's just physics. And if I do it, it will work. If I don't, it won't.
No saving midway, because you've either blocked the air, which then you've got to do it again. So you missed it. No.
Perhaps, Debbie, do you often instruct your students to practice it in certain word positions over others? You'd know probably where you get a better target out with your students. Is it usually easier at the front of words because they've got that time to prepare?
It is easier. So all the drills I try and say, just get an R and go through all the vowels. And if they've got a good control of the sound, they go ra, re, ri, ron, ru.
Oh yeah, in the middle then. Yeah.
And then they do the nasal rin, ron, ron, because they get harder. But also in French, we exaggerate. We make the R at the first part of the word a bit stronger. So there's a whole list of words.
Yes, good.
And then when there's a secondary R later on that's pronounced, like in restaurant, it just gives them a double exercise in the same word. So
yeah, excellent. So those words will be a lot harder, or phrases that have, more than one sound, not but sound will be a lot trickier. There's one context that I think could be made easier in knowing that the sound has voice vibration. So every time you make this sound in the middle of a word, I would assume you always have a vowel before it.
Yes. Oh,
always.
You could have an A-N. It'll be a vowel sound.
Yeah, it'll be a vowel. Like it could be a nasal vowel or, just any vowel, I think. Yep. Okay, so what you need to watch out for in the middle of words is that you don't segment the sound and split it from the syllable. So if I have boulangerie, yeah, if I create a gap,
yes.
Boulangerie, it's going to be harder to get going. So if you know that this sound has voice vibration, as do all the vowels, what I could recommend is perhaps that your students lengthen the vowel, even though it will change the stress of the word. But if they lengthen the vowel, the tongue's always down for a vowel. Always. It might be in a different spot in the mouth, but it's always flat and low. Stretch the vowel slowly and then aim to put your hands on your voice and buzz from here. So you'd go boulangerie, like that, rather than boulanger, and then you've got to get yourself together. So you can buy time on the sound that precedes the when it's in the middle of the word, and that would be the hardest spot to get it out, I think.
Yes. And
when you're on your vowel, put your hands on your voice so you feel the vowel, and then you've got to keep it going to get the link. Boulangerie, like that. Yeah. Does that sound?
It does. It makes a lot of sense to do it like that. Yeah, because sometimes, the one in the middle of the words
is hard. Middle's always hard.
Yeah, for my untrained processing of what they're doing, it's like, they had lots of time to get together for the first one, but the second one they're having to do it all over again. But elongating that vowel or nasal vowel sound will definitely help.
And Debbie, with that, your students could pull out the vowel, like the segment in the word, and do it on its own first. So we've got I just did a guttural German. Sorry, I went too far back, yeah? And you just pull out the little segment on the syllable, do it by itself, and then immediately go through the word, but perhaps really stretching the vowel. I'm not sure if that helps, but the position of the sound in a word, you can think you've got a sound, and then it can be really demoralizing because it will break down. So what you have to do is know what was happening before that sound that got in the way of you making that shape.
Yes.
And it could be that you were, sometimes we move too fast. So if you are using a rapid rate, the English if that's your first sound, first language, it's so easy to get out. It's actually a really difficult sound to produce, but it's really easy to get out because you're used to it. So you've got to watch out when you've got the French because it's a sound you're not used to, you're not calibrated for it. So it will take a little bit of extra duration to make sure it's long. And it's also longer than an English because that's this is our It's long, but we don't make it long. We just say red. Whereas this one, if you looked at how long it took to form, just imagine it's a 2-second sound. Give it 2 seconds here in the throat. Hope that's helpful.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Good.
Yes, so much. Because French people struggle so much to do that R2.
The English red. Same thing. They've got to lift the tongue and take the time to do the opposite of what the Australian English native has to do. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And my students still love the sound of French people speaking in English. I'm like, that's how you sound to us. Don't beat yourself up. It sounds charming. It sounds lovely. It's just a different way of saying the same.
Yeah, true.
As long as you're understood, that's the main goal. You're not trying to sound like them. So, I love it. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Nasal sounds can be quite tricky. As you said, we don't want them to go into the train station in France and have to speak like this.
No.
That's kind of how I help them get those nasal sounds, pinching their nose, because it's very nasally. And then it seems to all happen in the lip area.
Yes.
I always have the and kind of over exaggerated, and I can tell them, look, you should be able to lip read which sound I'm doing, because the lips are so different. So once they can trust that their lip expression works, they're halfway there. So could you
correct.
tell us a bit more about nasal sounds and how you got around them?
Look, the nasals are tricky because what you're saying on the nasal vowel is different from what you're seeing. So it's always, and there's lots of discussion around that. I would say for the cue with the finger, I'll just share, let's just do something on the screen. I'll just show you why Debbie is telling you all to just check here, so that you know kind of what is happening mechanically with the sound, and that might sort of help some of the learners that are a lot more visual, mechanically based. So when we produce a nasal vowel, we've got this thing called the soft palate or velum. It just sits here, and that's what we use for yawning. We kind of lift it for a yawn. We use it for swallowing, so that when we swallow our food, this lifts so that no food, when we swallow down that way, goes through our nose. So we get nasal regurgitation and things like that. So generally, if you don't have any anatomical deficit with your head and neck area, with the nerves, you'll be able to move this. You're moving it all the time as you speak. What you need to have is that the flap needs to be down, just like it is for and So it has to stay down rather than seal at the top. So there's lots of sounds that you need it down for, like d, yeah, although we don't hear the nasal sound. So we keep the flap down, but we have to send some of the air from the lungs. So this is the pipe to my lungs. We have to send some of that air up, and the majority of the airstream has to come through the nasal passageway rather than the mouth cavity. So it's good to take like without nasal and feel where your sound is coming through.
Yeah.
And the bulk of your sound is in your mouth into the room. Versus and when you do the second one, you should feel like your sound stream is wide. It's kind of a perceptual thing. So you feel this with the sound stream rather than this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, much wider cone. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a wider cone. I'm not sure if that analogy will work for you all.
I get it the way you describe it just now. I've never thought of it like that. So yes.
Yeah. So playing with that position is good. So with the drills, because I know Debbie mentioned that she gets you all to drill through your vowels in repetition with real words and things. What you can do is just take the one that doesn't have the nasal vowel, feel like really monitor where your sound stream is coming from, and then wide vibration through the face, and this will buzz, but you can you might even feel it kind of in here as well, or here. Everyone's a bit different. Some people don't even really feel the nasal vibration when they make these sounds, because we use these sounds for voice therapy drills as well in our clinic. But keep the tongue down.
Okay.
Make sure your tongue's not doing anything.
Yeah.
I hope that's helpful.
Yes.
And then the shaping of the mouth is something that's really, you just take the vowel shape you need for any non-nasal sound, but make sure you put it through the pipes, through the nasal passageway and mouth, with the position of the vowel that you require for that sound. So the vowel shape you need to position before you send the sound through. So make sure your shape is right. Like if you're going for, air, make sure your tongue's in position, and then prepare to buzz through.
So just to add to that, for the French learners, we have AN, AM, as well as EN, EM, making the same sound in French, as close as the most general French neutral sound. Basic sound is with no accents, with no regional accents, because there's lots of accents that pronounce it slightly differently too.
Right.
This shape kind of mouth.
Okay.
AN, EN, AM, EM. So all those ones, the mouth position is similar.
Oh, okay, right. So then you just, so the big challenge then is when you see EN, making sure that you're not substituting something slightly different onto there. for me, Debbie, the hardest one has always been to do it when there's like, it's this symbol with nasal.
Yeah, so the
Yeah, that one. Yeah, that one plus nasal is very hard, and we have to sing that. That's like, I can't even sing French. Please, God, don't make me sing French. when I have vowels like that, yeah, it's rocket science.
Yeah. So the same thing. It is a wider cone, but the mouth movement, the mouth shape doesn't change that much. It just stays as a short. I always say, think of blowing a kiss or drinking out of a straw. Is that?
Yes, yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's good. The straw one's great.
It works for the bon, whereas the on, there's got to be a bit of emotion.
Yeah, because the vowel's open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the final one is a bit of a forced smile, which is UN and UM, IN and IN, and then AIN, EIN. There's quite a few sound letter combinations that will make this one, so it's a really useful one, and it's a bit of a forced smile.
Yeah. It's pretty close. In opera, I know that we always want to substitute like ing, this sound, so it's pretty close to that, but just give a bit more through the mouth as well.
Yes, and yeah, it's hard to admit, but yeah, I'm doing.
Because it's, I mean, the tongue is down and it's nasal, but it's not quite ing. You just, I know that in opera, English singers usually just anytime we have a nasal vowel, we just go through our nose, and it's not right. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, I love it. So they were the 3 nasal sounds, and they're the key ones. I have some people saying, well, there's a 4th one. Those 3 are the only ones I pronounce with a neutral French accent, and no one's ever asked me, are you not French? So they're definitely clear and natural. The last sound I wanted to ask you about is our vowel. So we have the U vowel. That is not a super easy sound for my learners. They often switch it for double O in English. So when we say bu, drank, they say bou, which ends up being another word in French, B-O-U-E, which is mud. So they say drank instead of mud, because we often have another word that could be an U and one can be an U. So
right.
Vowel U, how hard is that one to say?
It's hard. Yeah, it's very hard, because when you go to say that one, you're hearing, generally with vowels, when we try to produce a vowel in our second language, we replicate and substitute the vowels we know. So you need to know what the vowels you have are, and know what's the difference, which I'm sure you've gathered. I mean, that's not hard to understand, but to know, I would say the best way to achieve this is to know where your tongue is. And there's a very big difference between the vowel of French that Debbie's talking about and where your, Davy, I've pronounced your name wrong. I'm so sorry.
That is
Davy, I've done it. And we even had a conversation. I'm so appalling. It's been a very busy week. I am so sorry.
That's absolutely fine.
On my screen, Davy.
Before we press record, everybody, I totally butchered Sarah's surname, but it was before we press record, so I get to have the higher ground on this one. We both have tricky names that will cause lots of conversation and help give people a hand to say it correctly. So
yes.
But I answer to anything because it's not spelled right, so I'm fine.
Oh, sorry everyone to mispronounce your beautiful teacher's name incorrectly. Like I don't know her even properly. It's really rude. Well, now we've got that sorted. So the main issue with the French vowel, I'll share my screen again because we can look at the vowel pyramid, which is terrifying, but nothing to be afraid of. Okay, so vowels are categorized in 2 core ways, actually 3, but 2 main ways. Front, central, back. That refers to where your tongue is. So all of the front vowels, I'll just run them. All of these are in English. So we have E, a, ah. And hearing me say those, you'll be able to copy me exactly because you're hearing sounds that you have that you're calibrated for. Then we've got back vowels. So when we make those, the tongue goes back in the mouth. And then we have the central vowel here in English, the only really central vowel we have, which is like the. And also in French, you have that for je.
Yeah, it's a perfect
so
one actually for middle.
Yeah, so it's great that you've got the most common vowel of English, which is you can apply that straight to your French all the time. And I doubt that many of your students would have issues with that sound once they know to use it, because they've got
you spell, it's often hard because they see the letter E and first they have to stop thinking the name of that letter is E, and then I've never used the, probably because Mum's Irish and I have never said that word.
Oh yeah, you'd say for different vowel. Yeah, true.
So I start with a disadvantage with the TH, any TH words. We usually find that sound in fur or yes sir, sir. That seems to be that same, that I.
Yes, both, yes. Yeah.
Kind of work for.
Yeah, that would work. Yeah. And then the back vowels, this is where you'll get into trouble. So here we have oo, like you and Luke, and that's the one you mustn't place on the French vowel that we're referring to. So when we look at the French vowel, I will just quickly get it for us. So it's this one here, okay? And this is the one we don't want to put on there, or like put. So English has these two vowels. Yeah. We see them on many words. So we've got this one here. I'll just write an example of a word we'd get with it, like put. Yeah. Actually, I should just put look. Look versus Luke. So those vowels mustn't fall on what we need here. So let's look at the main difference. This one is round, just like those. Mm-hmm. But the difference is the tongue is where your tongue is for words like sit. It's just slightly back. Yeah. So, and now, no one told me this. I'm just using phonetics. So Debbie, correct me if I'm wrong, okay? So we're going to use a vowel we have to get it, and this should save the day. If you speak German, though, you have a head start. You can just use a U with an umlaut. It's kind of close enough. So if you have any German, connect it from the German U with umlaut and check with Tavy that it's correct. But that should be the same sound. It's the same symbol in phonetics. So here we have I, and your tongue is loose and flat. I, your mouth isn't round. So now we're going to take the tongue back slightly. I, U. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes!
Sounded perfect.
And this one always does my head in when I'm singing in German and in French, because I always want to put ooh, and it makes a massive difference of meaning in German as well. So you need to make sure that you do that. So the process is, you could take a word you know. Let's find, Tavy, can you give me a word that would have your target vowel, like that we could maybe line up with, so we could do a minimal pair
with an L, like a Lu. Or the French name Luc to line up with the Luc.
Oh, okay, yeah. So what we could do is we could take the English word lick, which will feel so far away, but it's actually closer than what you're substituting. So you go lick, I, your tongue's at the front, pull the tongue back a bit, round your lips, look. I, u, lick, look. Lu, u,
lick, Luc.
Luke, u. It's like, yeah, it's tighter. It's more round, isn't it?
It's super round. It's as round as that blowing kiss.
Yes. So the other factor you consider is that it's closed, like the vowel is closed, which means you mustn't open your jaw too far.
Okay, very narrow.
Yeah. So if you look at, I don't know if this helps, but if we look at the, I'll just do a little side view. So if you,
I've never seen so many images of
the anatomy. I know, I'm trying to find, let's just get, okay, maybe this one is good. So if you look on here, you'll see the tongue, and your tongue, when it's on a front vowel, I'll just draw where it sits. So a front vowel, it's sitting right at the front. A central vowel, it's approximating the center. It can't really go in the center. And a back vowel, it's kind of pulling back. Okay. So for E, you're right here. E, lick. For your target vowel, you want to put your tongue, I would say just put your tongue just a step back. U.
Yes.
U.
Yeah.
Does that help? Very tricky.
It does, absolutely. It makes so much more sense when we see the pictures as to where it is. In a simplified way, I often say, notice where your tongue goes when you say E.
Uh-huh.
And then notice where your lips go when you say oo.
Uh-huh. And put them together.
Put them together.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we go from EU to get the U, EU, and then the other way around, where we go from an U to an E, and then get them to just put them together at the end. So
yeah, it's so hard.
But it's reassuring that with two sounds that two sounds that exist in English, look and Luke, being able to then just change your tongue more forward, that you've basically done it. So
Yeah,
we're not far
that as well. Yeah, you could also just take Luke, Luke, look. Just bring the tongue slightly forward from oo.
Yeah. So if you had to try and say Luke with your tongue pinched between your teeth, just to force it there, Luke. That's what we're saying.
Yeah, and also, so for me, my tongue is always at the front of the mouth as much as possible, because that's the position for opera. So I always sort of bring things back from the front, because it's generally at the front as much as I can. That's where we get a beautiful sound from. But what you could think about is, okay, this is really simplistic but amazing. You're in the car, yeah? The front seat where the driver is a front vowel. The central seat is the back of the driver's seat. And the back seat is where the kids are. So your back vowels are in the back. Yeah, your tongue is in the back. Central vowels, you're right in the center between the driver and the passenger. Frontal vowels, you're pretty much on the steering wheel. So you want to be back from the steering wheel. Ooh.
That's where you sit. Yeah. Not.
That's where ooh is. Yeah.
You're slightly behind.
Ooh. And very round. Sorry, I forget the shaping. Ooh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
It's easier to make on its own than to put into words, because once you get in the word, you've got the letter symbol really interfering. So seeing that letter, and fortunately French has the same alphabet as English, but the alphabet's doing different things. So that's where you've got to watch out and really know, according to the word or the spelling, what you're placing on that vowel, and then just take time to position it. Maybe even split the consonant at the front before you do the vowel. Like you could go ooh, ooh, look, ooh, look. It's very no, it's Luke, Luke. See, so you've got to really, really slowly position it.
Yeah.
And don't rely on your memory every time you say it. So just because you got it right in one lesson,
yes,
the brain won't form it. You've got to replicate the movement to get your outcome. Unlike kids, they hear it, they remember it, and the sound is easy to remember. As an adult, we hear the sounds, we're like, oh yeah, I got it, I practiced it with my teacher, and then the next week you'll come back and you'll be still doing it wrongly if you haven't taken that time to position it and pronounce it. That's the hardest thing.
Yes,
that's the joy of learning.
I'm not going to get it, so it's harder for me, whereas the little 5-year-old was getting it the first time, but that makes so much sense. They've just got that power of mimicry that's kind of disappeared with us, because our brain took other things on, another worries, and had to get rid of any sounds we don't need on the daily. It's just gone, don't need those, and therefore the R, the on, but mechanically we all have the same mouth and tongue.
Exactly. So. And you've got the same skill to just take stock and do it very slowly, and don't feel stupid if you're doing it slowly. It's worth doing it slowly. The more you practice the error, the harder it is to get it right later down the track. So yeah, but don't give up. Just keep working.
Yeah, it can be a goal, and then it is some homework in between, some drills, and we can set you up with words to repeat, and then put it all in phrases, because we don't speak in individual words, and we speak sentences. I love it. Look, thank you so much. Parting word, what would you say to someone who says that I'll never be able to pronounce that sound or that word? What do you think you'd say to them?
I would say never say never, and use the great brain you've been given. So if you worked out some other things in life, not even related to language learning, you can always learn something new. And we see that even with people who've been affected by some really debilitating conditions. There's always space in the brain for new learning. You just have to find the way that works for you. With pronunciation, it's concrete. It's either right or it's incorrect. And the reason why it's incorrect would be because the mouth didn't make the position you need. So hopefully now from today and from everything you've already learned so far, you realize that sounds are not impossible to get. As long as you put the system in place to create that specific sound, there's nothing to stop you doing it. You just have to know, where is that sound formed, and take stock and do it carefully. And the more you do it carefully on a daily basis with regular drill, eventually you will be calibrated. You'll never get it wrong. Definitely. But it's what you commit to. So I think just that's perfect. Yeah.
Sarah, thank you so much for your time today. It's been so helpful and so interesting for us to find out about it. Thanks so much for your time.
See you later. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.